Hi, today we're going to look at Chapter 11 of the O'Donnell text. It's looking at motivation to learn, asking the question, what does motivation have to do with learning? So the first section of the chapter looks at social cognitive aspects of learning. So what is motivation to learn? The most popular approach is a social cognitive approach about thinking and cognition. So the model is that as we have some class, some lesson that students are supposed to be engaging themselves in, an individual student may feel confident about their abilities, about themselves, self-efficacy, or they may have doubt, they might have anxiety, stress, which inhibits the ability to learn or perform well in the classroom. Students may or may not have goal-setting skills. So, as students engage in the lesson, the learning activity, they fall somewhere on a spectrum of confidence to incompetence, of how they perceive themselves performing in this subject. Also, a sense of control over their environment in learning versus a sense of being overwhelmed and feeling unable to perform, whether or not they're actually able to perform may be a different aspect. If they don't believe they can, it's not going to work out well. And so at the end of the lesson, if they feel anxious, if they feel overwhelmed, and they don't perform well, this helps reinforce that belief system in the student that they're not good at this subject, they're not capable of learning this material. And when a student comes in feeling positive about their ability and they do well or reasonably well, that reinforces their belief that they can be successful students and that they are successful students. So this is the meaning behind the social cognitive approach to looking at motivation. The idea is that all these concepts and constructs in their mind come socially. So, hoping we can see this. The next section is on self-efficacy. This means the students' self-concept, their judgment of themselves, of whether or not they possess the skill and ability to complete the lesson. So, self-efficacy, our own belief in our ability to perform well, has a lot to do with performance. When students believe that they have the ability to perform in some area, they overwhelmingly do pretty well. When students believe they will not perform well, they also, excuse me, will go there and then not perform well. Activities to pursue. So the nature of the activity and the individual student has an intersection where, for example, if they're asked to do something they find difficult, like standing in front of a camera and teaching a chapter of psychology, and they feel very anxious and double, oh no, you know, there's the camera, oh, they're going to be looking at me, and for example, if the student were me, you would find that that has a lot to do with then how they perform. If it's an activity which the student is comfortable doing, they'll perform much better. So again, they go back to the concept of self-efficacy, this belief that the student has in him or herself that they're able to do this activity then affects effort and persistence. What does that mean? I think in simpler layman's terms, if I'm already convinced that I can't do this, I will give up very easily. I will reach some frustration point, and then I just shut down, and I'm done. And the belief then, there's a feedback loop, and the belief is reinforced because then you don't perform well if you give up. People who believe in themselves, have self-efficacy, will push farther beyond this barrier of frustration or difficulty and keep trying and find that they can be successful, or at least somewhat successful. And so that goes back to the self-efficacy, that students' belief in themselves that they can do the work. They note research that shows the quality of the student's mind with higher efficacy. They remain more clear-headed, focused on their task, and are able to continue working through whatever the assignment is, versus the student with low efficacy seems to have more jumbled thinking, gets distracted more easily, and doesn't finish. So what we find, what research finds, is that when you can test students, when you can judge them to have high efficacy, they overwhelmingly perform much better in school in terms of assessment and overall ability, parent ability to comprehend the material or finish assignments. So we obviously would like to have students with self-efficacy. So how do we get there? The students are where they are at with their self-efficacy from the prior experiences that they've had. As I said earlier, it's a feedback loop. So the place where they're at is arrived at in their mind, in their psyche, from the cumulative past experiences that they've had. Mastery modeling programs. So we want to promote self-efficacy. And try to help students find that if it doesn't appear to be part of their repertoire. So, mastery modeling programs they suggest 7 steps to implement mastery modeling program. So first, as a teacher, you need to identify what skills are needed for a given lesson. Then using a questionnaire or by doing personal interviews, it's possible to assess where students judge themselves to be with these skills. So now the teacher can model components of how to learn how to do this skill. How do we take notes effectively? This can be taught to a class. How do we do anything, how do we use mnemonics to help us memorize facts that we need to know in some classes? How do we cite text to support our argument? How do we go about actually doing that? How do we find the supportive text in a document? Then the next step is to have the students emulate doing this skill. So we pretend practice doing it. And so we simulate a learning experience while teaching them skills that they can use that will be useful in the lesson or unit being taught. Then you put students into groups and they practice using the skills in group. And then we move on to actually using the skills in the classroom for an actual learning activity. And it's important for the teacher to display instill a sense of confidence, to display confidence for the students so that they can learn to master a skill. They mention socioeconomic status and technology, and that's certainly true. Certainly in the school district where I'm at, there are upper middle class and middle class and pretty much poverty class families. So not every student has the same access to technology, to computers. Access to the internet at home is not a guarantee. Our school luckily was able to afford iPads for all students, and I think the high school now has Chromebooks, and they have their own connection to the internet that's paid for through the school, so that their school iPad or laptop should be able to connect to the internet. They can take it home. So that was a really nice feature of this school district, that we're able to eliminate that inequality where some students may not have the same access to technology as other students. So, and when looking at students with learning disabilities in terms of self-efficacy, I think a somewhat natural knee-jerk reaction might be just to lower expectations. Oh, you are LD, you should only expect to be able to do half the work. Oh, you shouldn't expect to be able to understand this. No, we should have the same expectations for our learning disability students. We need to find ways for them to learn. Perhaps they need to be taught differently. Perhaps a student has dyslexia and they can learn the text orally. You find a way to get it on audio and get them headphones so they can learn that way. You simply teach the students how to be successful in the classroom instead of accepting that, oh, they're LD, so we'll just pass them and not really attempt to teach them. Of course they can be taught. They just need to be taught differently. The next section is on mastery beliefs. Hoping this is somewhat visible on the PowerPoint. So mastery beliefs this is not the same as self-efficacy. Mastery beliefs is a student's self-concept of what control they have over success or failure. It's how they believe that they have control or do not have control over the learning outcome, which, hopefully at the end of the day as teachers is our goal is that the majority of our students have good learning outcomes, that they have been presented the material which you've covered and they have mastered it, they understand it now. But mastery beliefs looks at the student's belief in whether or not they have control over that outcome. So the model that they show in the text, if we can project this briefly for the class. Efficacy beliefs is the student's capacity to engage in the behaviors that they need to deal with the particular learning situation. So efficacy affects their behavior, their self-belief in success or failure affects how they act. Mastery beliefs, a sense of self-control over your destiny, as it were, academically, then leads to the outcome, A, B, C, D, whatever they get. Now, reactions to failure. So, students that feel helpless to prevent failing or rejection, they give up, withdraw, act as though the outcome is beyond their control. So instead of adjusting their behaviors, instead of looking for a new strategy and engaging a new strategy to find a way to success, sometimes some students, when faced with failure with a learning outcome, will just simply give up. So why do some students persevere after making a mistake, after perceived failure, and other students continue on and do well? It has to do with their own interpretation of what this failure means to them. They suggest 2 self-talks programs. The harder it gets, the harder I have to try. I love a challenge. I'll keep trying, is your AB student. And other students, their self-talk says, I'm no good at things like this. Oh, I'm just no good at math, so why should I, I can't do it, so why would I try? As if we're asking paraplegics to walk or something, well, of course I can't walk, I don't have legs, so why would I attempt to find, there's no point in, they would feel there's no point in finding a strategy which would make them successful if they believe that there's no way to get to success. So they will act silly. They will display negative emotions, and you can spot the student. You can spot the student that has a sense of helplessness by how quickly they give up. So, and this helplessness is a learned behavior. And they cite Michelintzer and Peterson research. In students with mastery beliefs that have a sense of control, recall, over their outcome, so they believe that their behavior leads to the outcome. Here. And students with this learned helplessness, their perception of the world is that these outside...
Please excuse the interruption. Can we have 3rd through 5th grade come to the auditorium for the author visit?
Outside influences are what affect their learning outcome. Not their effort, but it's something else's fault. I'm no good at math, so I don't have the math gene. So learned helplessness is a state where students have a belief that their learning outcomes are beyond their control. So there's no point in trying to do something, trying a new strategy, if it's out of my control anyhow. There's nothing that they can do. So, this helplessness, learned helplessness, is something that needs to be addressed for the student to come to believe that they can be successful. And it comes about beginning with a bad outcome, flunked a test, for example. So, and so it's about how the individual student parses this in their brain, in their life. Is the bad outcome, is my F because of me, because I didn't study hard enough, or is it because of some outside circumstance? Oh, daddy's an alcoholic and I can't study at home, and I don't know, you have something else to blame it on, and I'm sorry about your situation at home, but we can still be successful at school. So they look at explanatory style, how students explain or talk about or think about the reasons are for their poor outcome, their F on the test. An optimistic explanatory style explains the bad event with things that are unstable and uncontrollable, such as I lost the test because I didn't try hard enough. A pessimistic explanatory style explains bad events with stable and uncontrollable events, such as I lost the contest because I have low ability, I can't do it. So the failure is a chronic thing, and there's nothing the student can do about it. It's uncontrollable. So the explanatory style that a student uses for their F on the test, for their poor academic outcome, tells you which category they're in and whether or not they need some sort of coaching to help them think about their failure or lack of progress differently. So clearly what we want to do is prevent a sense of helplessness, and we want to promote mastery so that students can be successful. It's possible, certainly students can face discrimination for various reasons, which seems very valid in terms of being a chronic condition and it being uncontrollable. That is certainly true. But how often do the students have awareness of the fact that they can do something about it? So we can let a classroom who's performed poorly, let's say on a test, know that they are going to be successful, that we are going to find a way to learn this material, and can talk about these things in the classroom. So in doing this sort of intervention, so my student says, well, I'm just bad at math. My parents are bad at math and they're fine with it, so I don't, I can't learn it. So what can we do? How do we turn this thinking around? You want to give, and you want to avoid denying what they're claiming as being real. Don't hammer on them about that, but instead provide an alternative positive thought. Try to dilute the potency of their pessimistic attitude by giving them alternative and valid, real suggestions and reasons why they can be successful. So hope suggests that the more hope that students have that they will do well or that they will do better, they find greater persistence in the activity. So clearly, if you keep trying and persist in attempting to learn the material, you're going to do better. So we want to foster hope in the students. So how do the sense of helplessness and or anxiety affect hope? They take away from a student's hope of doing well. So what can teachers do about that? We can guide students through the self-mastery program, explaining and modeling behaviors and teaching them skills that help the students be successful, having them practice those skills, and then implementing them in the classroom. So a goal is defined as whatever a student is trying to accomplish. Research shows students with goals outperform students who don't have goals. So that brings up the idea of goal setting. Perhaps if students with goals do better, we would like our students to be able to set goals. So here's another technique we can use to help our students be more successful. So one of the tricks with goal settings is not to raise the bar too high so that it's unreachable or less likely to be reached and the student will be discouraged. You want to make goals realistic and reachable so that there's a good chance a student can meet a goal, or a good chance, very good chance, the student can get close to meeting a goal and then feel positive about it, because we want this feedback loop to now instill in the student that they can be successful, that they are successful. And as that continues, they know they're successful because they've seen the evidence in the past. And this is where we'd like to get them to. So how do we get to achieving the goal? The two behaviors to look at that we would want to encourage would be getting started and finishing up. So half the problem is in simply sitting down and getting started on the activity. Yes, you will need to take an hour this weekend and sit down and study this chapter in history. You will have to sit down and practice these problems in math so that you're able to do them on a test in class next week. But if you don't actually sit down and get started doing that, you're not going to achieve your goal. Finishing up is similar to perseverance. It's a matter of not giving up when there's distraction, but continue pushing through and making sure that you actually make that half hour of practice problems in math. Actually read your history chapter for an hour and not get distracted by something else. Feedback's important in goal setting. So you need to be able to judge where you're at in terms of achieving your goal in order to have a sense of whether or not what you're doing is working. Interest has to do with attaining goals, and which goes back to one of the reasons research shows this: if students find a subject interesting, they're much better able to stay focused on it. And this is why we want to find relevance to the student's world, socially, culturally, linguistically, to find ways to make lessons relevant to them in their life, something that actually makes sense, so they have some sense of there's a reason why I'm learning this. There's a reason why I'm doing this, and the reason is interesting. It's relevant. So this is something I could look into as opposed to something completely abstract. Now there may be many PhDs who can work in an abstract level and do very well, but low battery warning. Not all people have that ability to excel at an abstract level. So it's important to make things relevant to the kids' lives so that they have an interest, and that helps them to learn. Possible selves discusses the idea of, say, having a guest speaker who's a police officer. Students can think about becoming a police officer. They can think about becoming an FBI agent. Is something they'd like to do. And then they can begin to move themselves in a direction which makes that possible. Achievement goals. And mastery goals. Achievement goals apply specifically to achievement settings, so performance measured against some standard. Mastery goals, which are also called learning goals, focus attention on developing competence. So it's a matter of mastery goals are about learning how to be successful. Performance goals focus attention on showing that one has ability at the task. So there's different types of goals. The difference between mastery and performance goals is important because having a mastery goal is associated with ways of thinking and behaving. A performance goal is associated with relatively negative and unproductive ways of thinking and behaving. So students who have a mastery goal, so you say to yourself, I'm going to try to do the best I can, is a positive thing. But having a goal which simply pits you against a standard leaves you with failure or success. Whereas promoting a desire to do better leaves the student open to more possibilities of learning how to get there. There's two types of performance goals. Approaching success or avoiding failure. So it's probably not too amazing that research shows that students that have a goal of avoiding failure do not do as well as students that try to approach success. Self-regulation. And PowerPoint that, we may have moved the camera. Can we see this somewhat? I'm not sure our technology is quite up to the task. Self-regulation is about setting goals, using good strategies for learning. It's also important that we monitor how effective what we're doing is. So we need to check in periodically and see if we're at where we had hoped to be at some point in time, and then make adjustments if necessary, if we're not where we want to be. So in this whole cycle, they're calling self-regulation, how students can learn to be successful on their own, which is something clearly as teachers we would want our students to achieve. So the 4 steps again involve forethought, what the student expects at the beginning of the task. Reflection then is looking critically at how we have performed in the task. Self-monitoring, where the student keeps track of their progress, and then evaluation, where we decide which processes appear to be working and which ones do not, so that the student can make adjustments to their plan. Co-regulation is where we see the teacher assisting students in their self-regulation. So sometimes students may need some assistance in this process. How are you going to study for this test? Let's take a look at that. How do you spend your time studying for the test? after the test, we can go through these steps with the student. You know, what did you do? What did you not do? How can we do better? What are we going to do next time to improve? And so we can teach students how to do this on their own. Students with special needs, if anything, need more help with self-regulation than the rest of your classroom. In special education, there's often prompts for students so that they remember when they need to plan or self-monitor or evaluate their work. So in special ed, it's part of the curriculum and taught to the classroom, and it's a part of the instruction. So students with LD usually have difficulty with reflection, self-monitoring, and self-evaluating their work. So these students, if you have LD students particularly, will benefit from co-regulation. That's our lovely model teacher assisting the student in learning how to self-regulate. Self-concept. Let's see if we can get our lovely projector back on. Aha, there it is. Self-concept. Yes. Hi.
So my class is downstairs in an assembly with
Uh-huh.
an author. Could you, I'm Regina Swanson, and so my class is supposed to be in here right now.
Mhm.
Could you come and be in the auditorium with us?
I could do that.
Yeah, that'd be great, because then you'll be covering my time.
You need a